For more on this development, I'm being joined by our business editor at TVC News, Tolulokwe Ogunjobi. I also have joining us online the CEO of Finance with Mukhtar, and that is Mukhtar Mohammed. But I'll begin with Tolulokwe Ogunjobi, who is with me in the studio. I'm sure, Tolu, you've looked forward to today because this, of course, is your core area.
Indeed.
This budget has significantly been taxed, the budget of consolidation, renewed resilience, and shared prosperity. And of the sum of 58.18 trillion naira, some amount has been earmarked for infrastructure, in this particular year. Talk to us about, how this might really just impact the achievement of the government's goal for the new year.
Indeed, I like the fact that the president agrees that it's a budget of consolidation and renewed resilience, considering the fact that we are coming out of an economic reform, a major reform being instituted by this administration, and the fallout of it is what everyone knows. Everyone is feeling the impact. Businesses, private businesses, commercial entities, and even the ordinary man on the street. So, of course, we need to consolidate on that and on the positives that we've seen with indicators. Yeah. But if you look at it, you see that the focus is on defense and infrastructure, 1, 2. Yes. And you know what's been happening with regards to the challenges we've had with insecurity and how that affects agriculture. Our farmers can't go to the farms. We can't have cheap farm produce. And if that is not addressed, definitely there is a challenge. Infrastructure is also key because that will help reignite and reorganize our economy, because we've had that challenge of infrastructure, moving goods from place to place, and of course other internal issues that have to do with infrastructure. So I think it's a budget that is well structured, looking at the sectoral distribution. Yes. Is well structured, education, infrastructure, and of defense and security. So I think is well planned, and the budget deficit is also something I looked at, well planned. Yeah. Government is making more revenue than they used to make. Don't forget that in 2026, the new tax law will be implemented. Indeed. And of course, government is expecting to get more revenue from the people.
Indeed, and the Nigerians are really looking forward to what happens with this budget. We also have Mukhtar Mohammed, who joins us online to speak on this budget. Mukhtar, we have seen an improvement in amount, in total amount in this particular budget, and we know that inflation is said to have moderated, at least in this current year, and the expectation is that it would even be better in the coming year. What are, your key takeaways from this proposal, and what do you make of the president's focus on infrastructure and human capital development?
Maybe I wish I'm as optimistic as my friend Tolulokwe. When I look at the budget, whether it's really a budget of consolidation or not, because you said my key takeaway, look at revenue, expected revenue is about 34 trillion, expenditure 58 trillion. So what does that tell you? We might be going to that era where we have to borrow again, because we are looking at security, we are looking at infrastructure. But when you look at our revenue, that what is coming in for us, it will be very, very difficult for us to implement this project, because now you're looking at revenue projection by the tax law implementation, which is still subject to a lot of controversy. Will it kick up January, or will it kick up in 2026? Will we still have the capital gain tax and other taxes? So when you look at that again, servicing us is there. It's in taking a lot also of our revenue, and beside capital expenditure, which has to do with budget, we are paying more for revenues, and that will continue. So I'm not as optimistic as Tulu when you look at the budget. Oil benchmark put at $60 per barrel. Yes, it looks conservative, but where we are today, if we have to learn from experience, we ought to look at oil benchmark in the area that you need to be careful, because we have gone through this piece before, whereby we put oil benchmark at $75 per barrel, oil projection at about 2.1 million barrel per barrel. We did not meet any of those projections. Though now it seems a little bit conservative, because I see the projection about 1.88 million barrel per day. If you look at what we've been doing thus far this year, cumulatively, putting condensers and everything, we'll just be doing that 1.88 1.8 million barrels. So that for me looks fair. But I wish that we peg the oil price at between $55 to $55 per barrel, between $55 to $50 per barrel, because you can never say when it comes to international oil price.
All right. So, well, I guess the government is trying to, go into the new year with optimism, a whole lot of optimism, hoping that, when security and all of that is managed properly, improved, would get to, make more. And then the exchange rate is at 1,400 naira to the US dollar. How do you see that, Tolu?
I think that's conservative enough, looking at the fact that it's been flowing between 1,500, 1,450, 1,470, around about that. And there's enough supply from the central bank. Some Bureau de change operators now are already being given Forex. They are getting FX from the central bank. And there's been a bit of stability really in that space. So I think that is fair enough. Talking about 1.8 million barrels per day of crude, I think that is also not too much of a tall order. There's been a lot of work being done by the NUPRC, the NMDPRA, all of these guys in the oil and gas industry trying to improve production. So I believe for a fact that if production is improved and Niger Delta issues are being addressed at least to a level that has been very commendable. It's been a while we heard of ruptured pipelines and all of that. I think there's a bit of peace in that area. So if we have more rigs on, which we're expecting to come up, the NUPRC have thrown open some biddings, I think we should be able to meet some of these things. Yes, budget is just an assumption. You don't have to meet it 100%, but at least we know that some of these assumptions, to me, are conservative enough, and I think they are a bit achievable, at least to a level of a percentage. Yes, I know that the issue of borrowing could come up, but government must always be ready to, address internal revenue generation, that's IGR. I think government is also working seriously on that. So if that comes in, that could also merge side by side with whatever comes from borrowing. All
right, let's hear from Mukhtar. Inflation is projected at 16.5%, and we know that GDP itself, the growth is estimated at about 4.68%. How do we get to the point where even when inflation figure drops, the figure drops, we're able to see it translate, to better life for the average citizen when they have food on their table, Mukhtar?
Yes, let me say, yes, I think I agree with that opinion by Tolu about the exchange rate conservative nature. Like I said, also the oil barrel conservative nature. That is a little bit conservative compared to what we saw last year. But again, let's go back to your question in terms of inflation dropping down, why we are not seeing that in the life of every Nigerian. If you look at the inflation data very, very well, you realize that year-to-year inflation is coming down, which is as a result of the rebasing of the Nigerian economy. Remember, before the rebasing, inflation was as high as 34%. So when you did that rebasing, we saw that inflation came down to as low as 28%. And from there, we saw that downward trend. So if you look at year to year, fantastic. Now, if you look at month to month, then you really see where the challenge is. Inflation is still sparking. Food and beverages are still high. You still have transportation, housing, even fuel consumption. It's in some areas are still relatively high. So you see, when the CBN look at all that, they were able to say, look, we need to maintain the status quo the way it is so that we don't spike inflation, because they realize that inflation is still a little bit risky. So definitely 16% in terms of projection. Remember, we are at 14% now. Yeah. So if you look at that, the government is saying that be ready for a little bit slight up in inflation, because again, don't forget, Tolu knows this very well, that we are going into an election year. And in election year, there's a lot of movement in terms of liquidity from point A to point B. And the informal sector normally benefit mostly from this movement of liquidity. But again, the impact on the generality of the economy is always negative. I think that's a projection. I think for the first time I'm agreeing that they are looking at it. 4% GDP growth. I don't think that is not achievable when you look at our outside our rebasing, the fintech, the mining sector, all the sector. I think we'll soon see the effect of the rebasing in 2026. Those new investment that will come from those rebasing area that were not captured before. So I think that exchange rate 1,400 if these rebasing things work out fine, we are going to attract a lot of foreign investors into the market, foreign portfolio, foreign direct investor. But we need to keep our house in order in terms of the capital gain tax too. You know that.
Okay,
I know.
Especially as January is just a few weeks away.
Yeah,
we'll see how it all goes. Thank you very much, Mukhtar Mohammed, CEO of Finance with Mukhtar. Thank you for the analysis you've helped us with. And Tolu Lope Ogunjobi. Yes. Tolu, thank you so much for that analysis, but you're not going just yet. You will be bringing us business news after now. But just before we go on that break, one of the stories you should expect after the